Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Thank you.
Doing the best we can every day.
Yes.
So as I said in my email, these are going to be very organic. So I'm going to start by just asking you to say a little bit about yourself, what you do, your family, anything that you want to say that kind of gives us a bridge to extend on.
Okay. I'm Natalie. I'm a clinical social worker. I work for Durham Public Schools as well as do some evening work with clients. I am a divorced single mom. My son is now 19 years old. He's a student at State. And race has been an interest of mine, race relations, for a long time. My family, when I was a child, stepped over the color line. My dad had been a pharmacist director in directorships, and looking for housing where my sister and I could go to good, solid schools. It meant then moving to an area where there were no Black people, so my sister and I were the first. I was the first Black person in my school system. We moved away from home. That was in Ohio. So we moved away from Ohio when I was about 16. And since that time, I have just been interested in seeing the healing that comes with that's needed.
Yeah.
Because of what the prejudice and the discrimination that still exists.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to ask you probably an obvious question. Have you had the conversation with your son about operating in society?
Most definitely I have. There must be some genetics involved because he has kind of been like I was as a kid, this, sort of thought that all because I've tried to live a diverse life. My church is diverse. His schools have been. And so he's very much, no, that's not an issue. That's not. And yet I've even seen it in his life that it is. He may not recognize it, but it is there. So I continue to just try to definitely give him information, but recognize he's not quite there to take it in the way it needs to be taken. And even with what's going on now, I think there's a little avoidance of wanting to talk about what's happened.
Yeah.
Been happening.
Do you have fear every time he leaves your person, every time he leaves your house? Do you
Most definitely.
He's going to come back home?
Most definitely. And, I often think about too, there are a couple of things I say as a parent. I feel like I've been a good, loving parent, but one thing I feel like I've done is, my son has some anxiety. And I feel like some of that is my fault because I have always feared. I've always been sort of hyper vigilant about making sure I know where he's going to be in the right environment, who he's going to be with, just to kind of protect him from the things that do happen in the world. And I think so part of the avoidance in him may be that, okay, my mom is just kind of helicopter parent and I just am not going to talk with her about this. And I acknowledge that, but I don't know what else you do as a parent,
We are in the exact same place. My son is 21. My son goes to college 48 miles away from home. And I start praying the minute he pulls out the driveway to the moment that he arrives at school. And the same thing when he comes home, the same thing. And I think I am a helicopter parent as well because, when I think about my childhood, I'm considerably older than you, but I grew up in a rural town in South Carolina. And people said the N-word to me so often, I thought it was nothing wrong with the word. I thought it was just a euphemism, just a word. And it wasn't until much later in my life that I realized the context of what that word meant. But I'll tell you a story that happened to me. I was raised by my father's older sister. And we lived in a little town where downtown was less than 12, 14 blocks from your house. And so one afternoon, maybe an hour before dusk, I walked downtown to buy her a Christmas present. I grew up extremely poor and everything, but my mother's boyfriend had given me $2, and so I walked downtown to get her a Christmas present. And when I got back from that trip, and I'd gone with the woman, my friend that lived across the street. When I got back, my mother beat me like I had stolen $1 million. And for the longest time, I did not understand why she beat me so much for doing something which I thought was going to be good for her. I didn't tell her I bought her a Christmas present because, of course, it wasn't Christmas yet. But she just beat me. And she didn't beat me like, like some parents use belts and things. My mother got a tree branch. It probably wasn't a branch, but it felt like a branch, and beat me with the switch. And it was years. It really wasn't until I married my husband that I actually understood she was trying to keep me alive, because she understood the danger of me being out at dark in the town in which we lived. And when my husband explained that to me, it finally came into focus for me. Now I understand, because sometimes I just thought it was just unnecessary cruelty, but then I understand she was just trying to keep me alive. She only had a 4th grade education. She was a domestic. She cleaned for white people. She didn't have very much. I mean, we were poor and hungry most of my youth, so to actually now have a context of that, it makes sense. I try not to. I've never hit my son. I've never given him a beating or anything. I've taken away his PlayStation or his cell phone or something like that. But that's the closest to punishment that he has come in his 21 years of life. But I try not to be as overbearing as my mother was, because her fear was so intense that she was the least little thing would set her off. And so when I tell my son, sort of like what you said, when I have these conversations with my son, oh, Mom, you're over exaggerating, or Mom, this is really not this problem, or something of that nature. And my son calls me mother. He doesn't call me Mom. He says mother, he says, Mother, I need you to listen to me. And, and I sit down and think sometimes after we've had our discussion, am I doing him harm by making him fearful, making him concerned about his own well-being so that he doesn't live his best life?
Yes, yes.
And I'm assuming you have the similar thoughts when you leave your son, or your son goes away. Are you doing him harm, or are you,
right.
preventing him from living his best life?
Right, I most definitely do. A story that comes to mind with my son one day was, he was still in high school, and he came as a senior. He was a really good student, so as a senior, he didn't have the entire day. He got off early. And he came home one day and said, Mom, you got to pick me up on time from school, because if you don't, I'm going to be arrested. They made an announcement that students who don't leave campus can get arrested. So I said, no, son, that's not going to happen. And he said it again. And I said, I work for the school system. No, that's not going to happen. When he said it the 3rd time, and knowing how logical and how he normally gets information right, I felt myself go all the way to 100 and said to him, will you let them arrest you? And I got so angry in myself, and I just kept saying, let them arrest you. And he said, Mom, you want me to be arrested? I said, no, you let them arrest you, because when they do, and if they do, they're going to meet another mother. And it's not that I'm going to do anything illegal, but they will regret it. And then after I surprised myself, because I couldn't believe I had gotten that upset and that angry, because I could just visualize the school and the police officer arresting my shy, good kid. And so I calmed myself down, and I ended up calling the principal. Had a good conversation, and she did end up saying to me, well, no, we're not trying to have our students arrested, but we thank your son for trying to follow our rules, because we do want them off campus. So I know I can sort of understand that my son sort of like this from some of my conversations, because I'm so passionate about it. And you're right. I want him to live his best life. But that's part of living the best life, is being safe and not having some terrible thing happen to you that, takes that best life from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your life, in your work life, in your personal life, have you experienced discrimination or racism or microaggression or other kinds of forms meant to make you small?
All of the above, because in the 70s, when I first started school, the first time I heard the N-word was from another first grader. He came up, he shoved me, and he called me that word. And that was the first time I heard that word. And the way with the hate that he seemed to have, I knew it was bad. And so the first thing was at that time to kind of withdraw. And if you're thinking about this being almost the first beginning of school, it set the tone for me for the rest of my time in school. And I think it has a lot to do. I think even though I work in the field I've worked in, I've done a lot of work on self, I think there are parts of that that are still there because I dealt with racism so early. Other kids, I ended up having friends, I ended up being okay, but that was always there. I mean, I've been thrown out of people's homes, kid, how dare you bring her home as a friend?
Right.
So all of the above, to answer your question, I've experienced all of the above.
And today, do you feel safe in America?
No, not always, no.
What are the triggers that make you not feel safe?
I am very careful about being alone in the evenings. That's one of the things. Police officers, one of a bad habit that I used to have, especially when I was younger, was I drove too fast. So I often was stopped for driving too fast. And I didn't run into anything really. Most of the times the officers were respectful. They were okay. I did have one incident with a white female police officer up in Baltimore who had stopped me, and she took it all the way to court. And I learned that people can lie on you, and that's what she did. She lied about, what I had been doing and what my speed on my car was and all that. So yeah, I have, so tons of experiences and stories of how I've experienced the color of my skin as well as gender.
Absolutely. I always say the thickness of your lips and your hips absolutely describe your level of protection in America. Let me ask you this. So I'm sure you've seen the video of Mr. Floyd's death. What was the first thought that went through your mind?
My first emotion was just anger and sadness. But my thoughts had to do with, I couldn't understand it. I can't understand it. I keep thinking about, if I'm a police officer, the man is below me in handcuffs, lying down, and my knee is actually touching his neck. Surely I feel that vulnerable spot in his body. Surely I feel it and know that this is a person, and that he's saying he can't breathe, so maybe he can't. I need to let off. I can't even understand how you do that, how you don't have the compassion for that other person, don't care what they've done. You're now in control of that person, and you wouldn't let him up. I think it's horrible. It's horrible. But we as African Americans have seen this over and over again, and it's horrible.
It's absolutely horrible. And one of the things I was doing this with my husband. I said, hold your breath for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. He said, you would die. He said, you would die. And that's without anything on your neck or anything near you, just to hold your breath for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And so when I think about this, I go back, so as you said, this has been happening since 1619, and here we are at 2020. One thing stood out to me was James Byrd Jr. I don't know if you remember. He was a man in Texas that they had tied him to the back of a pickup truck and drug him for 3 miles, literally lynching him this way. And nothing came of it. We saw Rodney King, and nothing came of it. We saw a 12-year-old boy playing in the park with a BB gun, and nothing came of it. And so now it seems like we have a movement where they may be changed. but will I see it in my lifetime? I'm 61 years old. Will I see it in my lifetime? You know, and so when I think about Mr. Floyd, you know, I am glad that his death has brought attention to the plight of Black and brown people. But I'm also sad that a man had to lose his life for this to have an issue. Why is it every time a Black person encounters these things that death has to be the thing that gets us to march? You know, and a lot of my white friends have said, why are you rioting and looting? What do you do when you're angry? You know, what do? You walk around with a sign, you yell and scream, but nobody hears you. But if you start burning down buildings, breaking glass, people start paying attention. Now, that's not, I don't condone it at all. I don't think it's the right thing. But I do think it's a message that says, hey, something else is going on with me besides just this man shot. You know, when the white police officer went into the wrong apartment and shot a Black man in his house on his couch playing a video game. I mean, you know, part of you have to say, what sense does that make? I mean, I live in a neighborhood where many of the homes look alike. They had the same builder. And every house here, I know my house from their house. I would never make the mistake of going to my next door neighbor's house and trying to get in thinking it's my house. I guess unless I was drunk or intoxicated, maybe that might be the case. But I mean, coming home from work, I mean, although the day might have been stressful, I couldn't imagine doing that. And we see these stories over and over again. And a lot of people, specifically white people, think we're overreacting. We're taking this too far. You know, we're doing too much, you know. And it's just kind of really disturbing to me. What do you think about our actions and what's happening around us now?
I mean, you said it so eloquently and so well. You're right. I don't condone the damage of property either, but I understand it. I understand it. We're angry. We're tired of this. I was telling somebody there are all these feelings that I have, from sadness, to rage and anger, to just fear and anxiety, and at times even numbness. Even, you know, gosh. But I find myself still, I'm a Christian person as well, and I find myself saying to God, I want to make my impact too, to help solve this, to be here as long as I can, to do whatever I can. When I'm in the schools and I'm working with kids, and my school is mostly Black and brown, that hopefully I'm doing something to uplift them, to armor them up, as I say, for the world that is there. And I think we have to just keep fighting that fight and keep doing that, whether it's our kids or someone else's kids, to be teaching them to love themselves and teaching them also how to be activists, if you will, in fighting for what's right in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was an adjective you said in your description. Are you an angry Black woman?
I don't think so. Well, what a good question. Overall, I would say I've worked not to be that, but as I told that story about Chris and I, that did my son, there is that anger there that does come up when certain kind of triggers happen. And the trigger can be something that threatens your wellness and your health and your safety.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't call myself an angry Black woman.
Have you ever been called that by a colleague or a friend or someone? Have you ever been labeled as such?
Not that I know of.
Okay, well, then that's good. I mean, I do think that you're right. You do have periods where you're angry, but you usually keep it within yourself. It's not something that you pour out onto others. You know, you manage to contain and calm yourself enough to get past it.
But it took work to get there. So, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, I think that my natural tendencies as a person was to be someone who would fight, even back when I was first running into racism. And I wouldn't necessarily fight in the physical sense, but I was going to fight some other way. I was going to get at you. But I had parents who, you know, were teaching love of self, and that wasn't the way. You couldn't go and fight in the way that I might want to at times. And so I think that combined with your training as when you go into mental health field and you're looking at self and you're recognizing certain emotions in self and how to manage those, I think that's what has kept me from, at times, like even the example with the school and my son, going and just being, wait, what is this about? I pull myself back first, calm myself first, and then address the issue. And I think I've been doing that for years now. So,
but at some point, every time you have to bring yourself back to normal, kind of elevates a part of you that feels like, why am I continually having to keep my emotions in check when others are allowed to express those? So when the gentleman plowed his car through the Virginia University of Virginia protest group, why wasn't his anger moderated? Why wasn't he able to keep his feelings back? But we're expected all the time to behave, to fall in line, fall in step behind where we are. So let me ask you this question. So you're a psychologist or a trist?
I'm actually a clinical social worker.
Okay, so that falls into a whole nother category. Do you see more people like you in that field, and do you have opportunities for growth and advancement?
I do see more people like me in social work, yes. Growth and advancement in my current position, very little, probably. Yeah, I would answer that, very little.
And do you know people who do not look like you, who are in that field, who grow, advance, and are paid more?
Definitely.
And what do you, what tools do you have to combat that, to show your value?
I think one thing is experience. I've been doing this for a long time, and I think the experience helps me. I tend to, as I've watched myself in my current setting, I'm pretty creative, I'm passionate, and I think that helps because I have been able to work in some leadership, sort of volunteer work within my job. And I think it has to do with people kind of picking up and knowing that, I care and I want to make a difference for students and families and whomever I'm working with.
Yeah, that makes perfectly good. Thank you for that. So we have about 6 minutes. Let me ask you one other question. So as you go about your daily life with your job, your family, your house, all the things that make you who you are, do you ever get the sense that this is not where I'm supposed to be? And I'll try to give you a little bit of context in there. Stevie Wonder has a song called As. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but the name of the song is As. And then he has a line that says, I'll love you until 8 times 8 times 8 is 4. And of course, that's illogical because 8 times 8 times 8 will never equal 4. But one of the things he says in this song is he said, God knew exactly where to place you for this time. And so when you think about that, do you think that you are in the right place and space to have the best life you can for you and your family?
What a question. Wow. Good question. I do believe that God does have all of us in the place and time that we are to be in. So that I can easily say yes. The one thing I've been asking myself is I don't fully feel aligned with what my calling is yet. I do not. Some people would say that that's not possible. And the other day I was thinking about it and thought, well, wait a minute. There's, in the Bible, the story of Jonah. Jonah was not aligned. That's why he was in the belly of the whale. So it is possible to not be exactly where you're supposed to be, I believe. So to answer your question, yes, I'm in the right time I'm supposed to be in, but I'm not sure I'm aligned exactly with what I need to be doing.
Yeah. But again, I think too, what you said is correct. I think all of our steps are metered by God, where we're going, what we're doing. I would not call myself a Christian. I'm spiritual. I do not belong to a church. I do not go to church, but I have a morning reading and a discussion with God. And I remember to say thank you for even a cup of coffee or to go to the bathroom, because I believe that my life is centered in God and his vision for me. And so when I asked you that question, I asked you that question in a way that said, although you are right here, right now, what are the things that you can do to make life better for those that are near, far with you? So even agreeing to do this interview with me today is a part of the character of who you are, because you have something you want to say, and you matter. Your thoughts matter. Your ideas matter. And so to me, I'm just very appreciative of that. But I would say even more importantly, that you matter to others way more because they have a relationship with you. And so although you may not be aligned with what you think you should be doing, God is metering your steps, and you will get to your ultimate purpose and live that fully. So I'm grateful that you are here with me, and I'm grateful you are here with our students, our Black and brown students, as a model, so that they can see that you don't have to be blonde and blue-eyed or whatever. You could be an intelligent, sophisticated, beautiful Black woman.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That was very, very powerful. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm gonna leave these last two and a half minutes to you to say whatever you want to say. I want to say that before I upload this, I will send this video to you so you can watch it, and you will just reply back to me and say, yes, I'm good with it. If not, you could say, let's have a do-over, or let's do it at another time, or this is not something I want to do. So here are your 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes.
I guess I probably won't even take 2.5 minutes. I just want to say to you, I really appreciate, I don't know details what you're doing, but I know some, and I really appreciate what you're doing, because I think it's very important to have these conversations and to have the opportunity to speak with you. It has just been wonderful. I think that although we have had, in my experience, a lot of conversations in the past, and I'm always saying, okay, we're talking, it's time to take action. I think we still do need to have the conversations. I think the conversations also need to include, because sometimes the defense mechanism is to be very intellectual. I think sometimes we need to have the conversations that are the emotional ones. This is how this makes me feel. And I think that when we get there to our true inner self of how we feel, then we start to heal, and then we can do the work. So I'm going to be watching, because I'm looking for that place where I can, fit in to do whatever, to serve in some way to help this healing too.
I really believe that you are already doing it. Doing this video is your voice. I think that people just say, well, we're just talking, but no, we're not. We're telling stories. We're telling stories of our lives, our experiences. And as you'll see as days go by, not just Black, not just brown, not just white, but every person who's willing to sit with me for 30 minutes and discuss his or her life experiences and wants and desires are there. So I think there may be 5 or 6 of them that are up now, but I ask you to subscribe to the channel, keep watching, tell your friends to join me in a conversation and share whatever they want to share. Tell your son to have a conversation with me and share, because I did my son, and I was really surprised. My son has never experienced racism in his life, never, and he's 21 years old, and I find that amazing. He's a gamer, he's academically gifted, he's an affable young man, but he had never experienced racism in 21 years of life. Now, maybe that's relatable to my helicopter parentness, that I protected him and sheltered him, but I was really surprised by that. So, share, once you get the video, look at it with your son and see if he would want to do it. And if you think that this is a place where he could make his voice heard, because I think, we hear from the big people, right? People with plenty of money, platforms, and they always talk about these things. But in reality, hunger, poor education, these people could solve these problems in minutes. But, they choose how they want to get their message out. We should not have hunger in America.
That's
we have
right.
a gazillion millionaires. I wouldn't say a gazillion. We have quite a few millionaires and billionaires. They could wipe out hunger in one single step. But it's because it's not an issue that they've dealt with. So these conversations to me bring to light for people that these problems exist for us. That I am, and I have been called a number of times an angry Black woman. I've been called by my leadership passive aggressive. I mean, I've had people tell me to get the F out of their office. I mean, I've had some of everything, and I am still here fighting. And I'm fighting not for myself, because I'm closer to the grave than I am to the crib. But I will say this, I am fighting for those that are coming behind me. So, and I pray that as you look at this video and as you think about this, you think about how do we use our voices to make change? Because I think that's exactly what the protesters are doing. And so I hope this video chat will add to that tool for change.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Stay safe and continue to do the amazing things that you do. And I'm adding you now to my prayer list.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.